The future of Drupal teaming. A lot of big words, a lot of dreaming, obviously. So the main question is, are you ready to dream? I have a presentation of 10 minutes and a presentation of 15 minutes. So are you ready to dream? Yes, you are ready to dream. Of course you are. You have no other option, actually. So my name is Mathieu Spillebeen. I am or Mathieu, or Bob, whatever you can pronounce. I am a freelance Drupal Front-end developer. I am one of the organizers of Frontend United. It's a conference that we organize about Drupal Front-end across the globe and every continent. Pretty proud of that. And I'm also the envisioner of Compony, envisioner slash person that goes bankrupt really fast with Compony. I'm going to talk a bit more about that today. And please feel free to reach out to me over Twitter, email, or wherever you might find me. So, we're going to talk about three things today. Well, I say we, but actually mean myself. Very first, I'm going to start off with an analysis. An analysis where, with a big team, I worked on a big team on a project for over a year. And we're going to look at what we actually delivered. Once I covered that analysis, I'm hopefully going to be able to show you a problem I think we all collectively forgot we had. Once I've shown you the problem, it would be a very shitty presentation if I wouldn't come up with a solution now, wouldn't it? So, let's get started. Now, mind you, I am wearing a front-end hat though. So, the analysis is a very holistic one, but it shows the point really well. So it's a big project, 10 people worked on it full-time for a year. We delivered it, they're still working on it. And after that year, when we delivered the very first batch, we kind of had a look at what did we actually sell? If you work for a very long time in Drupal, and how many of you are developers? All right, very cool. And how many of you are accustomed to front-end development? All right, very good. When you deliver a Drupal site, what do you actually deliver? What did you actually sell? And we had a look at the file sizes and the amount of complexity that is in Drupal core, Drupal contrib, and the custom code. And we found this. We found that 65% is Drupal core that we sold. We downloaded it, obviously, but sold it as a site. On top of that, 33% Drupal contrib, and then a little part was 5%. Now mind, I am a Drupal front-end developer, and when I was showing this number to my colleagues, they all went like, what, a whole year? We only did 5%? And in the beginning it felt like a very sad number, but actually it isn't. The number shows that we are massively productive in Drupal. It shows that if you deliver a Drupal website and you do a lot of custom work, in this example, you still only have to make 5% of your website. If your client calls you up and says like, all right, listen, we heard about this Drupal thing, we're not a fan anymore, drop it out of the project, then you're gonna have to tell them you're gonna have to go 1,900% over budget because there is a lot of stuff in there that we kind of need, that we kind of rely on. Now, again, it's a holistic approach, right? How do you measure complexity, etc., etc. But it shows you that, for example, every feature that we developed, we first downloaded 7 other features first from Drupal contrib. For every code you write, you download 7 other lines of code first. That's amazing. The key term here is amazing productivity. Now, you all kind of know where I'm heading, right? Let's now look at the front-end analysis of this. That doesn't work. Let's try this. Yes, the front-end analysis. The number is going to be a bit different. The front-end analysis, it looks like this. Now, this isn't the headless project. We were still very much using Drupal. And we weren't going too crazy about stripping things out of Drupal. But we ended up with 96% custom code. 96%. Now, usually we want to strip away that 4% too, because we don't really know what it does, right? But it's 96%. And again, holistic numbers, right? This is just an example, but it shows the contrast. If it is like this for me in my project, it's very likely going to be similar for your projects. It means we start from a complete white piece of paper, from scratch, nearly all the time. Now, let's put those two together. If we put the backend analysis and the front-end analysis together, this is our project, right? This is the project we delivered. Drupal core, 66%, 33%, 5% custom backend code. And then this here, this is the thing we call the Drupal front-end layer. What a lie. It's not a layer. You know what a layer is? A layer is an abstraction on which we combine things together. This, we usually ignore the blue part. We don't combine things together. This is a Drupal front-end blob. And that's the problem I think we all collectively forgot we had. We are making massive Drupal front-end blobs. We have an amazing system on which we have a predictability of 95%. If you're... yeah, if you're... I saw one other flickering there. If anyone is having issues with flickering lights, we can turn them off. We have a 95% predictability of what is Drupal going to give you. I know for 95% sure how your Drupal project looks. While I've never talked to you before, I know for sure 95% of it is going to be stuff I already know or have used before or could find online, which is pretty amazing. We have a 95% predictability, yet we don't do anything on the front end with that. Isn't that crazy in many ways? We write, like, when we write CSS, when we write Sass, we write component-based theming, right? You have a component and then you go, okay, let's now not just go theming everything globally. You theme everything component-specific, right? Every CSS class you write, every JavaScript you write, it's always specific for a certain part. So everything is component-specific, which is amazing, which is beautiful. But then as soon as our code is done, we compile it into one big file. Why? Because we love to compile things together. We are all front-end developers and we love our compilation processes. That's why we do this. We write everything component-specific and we compile everything into one massive file. And as soon as we have this massive file of CSS and JavaScript, we ship it on every page for every end user to download. And then all of a sudden, there seems to be an issue with performance. Well, yes, of course. If you ship everything, every developer on your team on the front-end layer has written, it's going to be a performance issue. Now, another example. We have the Drupal Libraries API. You can't explain it to anyone else outside of Drupal. The Drupal Libraries API enables us as front-end developers to teach Drupal in which context to load which assets. It's astonishing. Drupal is way ahead of its time. We have this since Drupal 6 and even before, but I wasn't born back then. It's amazing in many ways. Yet, the Libraries API has been invented for Drupal front-end people. Yet how many libraries do you define in your Drupal team? I'm going to tell you. One. It's going to be called global, right? Because you have this one global blob. Now, if we ever get over our personal need of compilation, then we might have components again. If we have components, then we actually have our Drupal layer again. Now, if we have our Drupal layer again, it means that you could keep all your components separate. And that would mean you could share your components between projects. You're not going to be able to share every component, but in my experience, 1 in 3 components you will be able to share, which is already an astonishing high number. And we're getting closer to why we love Drupal, actually. But on the front-end level, why do we love Drupal? We love Drupal because of its open source collaboration. I have never met any one of you before, except for you just right there. Yeah, we love Drupal for its open source collaboration, yet the collaboration seems to stop as soon as we start thinking about the Drupal front-end. Why is that? Because of this. Because we always seem to think in these blob ways. That's my dream. I want to have cutting-edge Drupal front-end. I want to have cutting-edge front-end in my Drupal theming. And we're going to be able to do that once we start splitting up our own blobs into smaller parts and evolve each part in an open source way. That's amazing, right? I could now say, oh, thank you for coming to my talk, right? That's amazing. It's a good dream. Yay, everyone, one person applause because you were the only person I actually know. It's fine. Also, it's bad practice. On the end of the talk, you should all applause, right? Now, it's not this way. I had this dream a year ago already, and I was dreaming about it at home. My girlfriend didn't understand me at all. My family also doesn't really get this. And then I also had this dream about this very bit at work. I was dreaming about it a lot out loud. And I dreamt about it so much that I wasn't really working on the projects anymore. I kept on conceptualizing how this would look in a Drupal setup, that they actually fired me because of it. Which is amazing news, because they fired me over a year ago, all right? And yeah, exactly. I had a whole year to come up with this actual solution. Now, how does that solution look like? It comes in 3 parts. The very first part is we're gonna stop, how is that word again? Accommodating. We're gonna stop accommodating every Drupal front-end developer to be working in a blob way. That's the first part. And as soon as working in a non-blob way becomes the default, we can build on top of that in an expansive way. Now, the very first part, therefore, is the new team structure. If I can convince you of anything today, it's that one, my name is Mathieu, but also the very first layer. And that's the new team structure. That's the only layer. I'm going to show you 2 more. It's the only layer that's not optional. All the rest is optional. The new team structure is there to make a team. We can actually split up the team. And a team, it's still going to be a Drupal team, but they're going to be split up, which makes it a mere collection of components. Because that's what it should be, because it's a front-end layer. Now, next, I want to have a tooling workflow. I want to have cutting-edge Drupal front-end, but I'm not going to invent a whole tooling workflow, especially for my own. And then you're going to invent it for yourself, and you're going to invent it for yourself. And we're all going to have these different tools, all the different opinions, and everyone is going to be stuck in trying to explain to their project manager why they lost 2 weeks setting up a gulp. Now, instead of growing bold, I decided to open source my tooling workflow so we can all nicely collaborate on it. And I got very far already in this first year. The third layer is, therefore, if you can create your components in your new team structure, you can make them really fast and really good, and you're very productive in doing so, you're going to be either working very fast or very good. That's up to your manager to decide, or to yourself. And once you have all of these components in your project, it would be egoistic to keep them to yourselves. I don't need to explain to you the benefits of open source. Look at where we are now. So the last layer is a platform where, other button, where the components that we've just created, we're going to be able to share them between each other. That's the most important thing. Now, 3 layers. The bottom layer, required one. Now, this is an optional one, and this is an optional one. Wherever you stop being convinced about my approach, it's fine to drop off. The cool bit is, in this year, I was able to create this, and already 7 companies are using it in a way that it's really picking up speed. There's a lot of components already. People are contributing to the tooling workflow, etc., etc., because it already exists. Now, the platform itself, it's called Compony, and it's on compony.io. Don't open up your laptops yet. You can have the platform there, you can download a bunch of components, and also from the platform, you can download the new team structure with the tooling workflow embedded into it. That's the solution, right? Now, let's cover how that solution would actually look like. The new team structure. Remind you, the very first layer and the only one that's not, or the very first layer and the only one that is required. If you download the theme from the platform, it's going to look a bit like this. This theme is now called My Theme, just for simplicity's sake. You have 5 things in there. The bottom 3 files you already recognize, right? You have a .theme file, an info.yaml file, and a libraries.yaml file. Same old, right? Nothing to see there. Then you have 2 folders, from which the first folder you can actually ignore. It's a helper folder. The only relevant folder is components. Why? Because the theme is now a collection of components, right? Now, If you open up the components folder, it's going to look like this. Not exactly like this, but we're going to have 3 components, for example, just for explanation purposes, which means in this example, we have the global component, node component, and status messages component. If you download the theme from the platform, you're only going to have the global component. This is very self-explanatory, right? You have a theme and you have 3 components. And it's actually interesting enough to stay a bit longer on this slide, because we have to envision that when we start working in this way, this theme accommodates us in not thinking in a blob way, which means every line of CSS, HTML, Twig, JavaScript, YAML, or PHP that you're going to write is going to belong to one of those components. Because if you're going to keep writing stuff in a global specific way or a theme specific way, you're again thinking in a blob way. Everything belongs to a component. Now, just have that idea that everything should belong to a component. This is very simple to explain, right? If you open up a component, for example, the status messages component, it looks like this. The very first thing you should notice is that you have 2 levels. You have a dist level, and then you have the root level. Again, very straightforward. Now, the CSS is going to be the generated version of Sass, right? It's nothing complex there. The JavaScript version is going to be compiled into the JavaScript version in dist, linted, transpiled, etc., etc. And then the SVG is going to be the optimized version from the root level. Now you might think, Mathieu, Jesus, are you really going to create a dist folder in every component? Yes. Yes, I am. Because if you create one dist folder for all of your components, we're again thinking in the blob way. Now, the only 2 files I haven't covered of the slide is the libraries.yaml file and the html.twig file. Again, files you know already, right? I'm not explaining something radical here. The libraries.yaml we're going to cover first. The libraries.yaml defines a library called status messages, the exact same name like your component. And then in there, you link to the files that that component needs, the CSS and the JavaScript. And where is it located? Well, it's just dist. And then you link to the names of the files. Again, it's very simple how this works. And this should give you an aha moment. No, it's a mental aha moment, but that's fine too. You have the HTML file, and in there you attach the library that you just defined. It looks like, yeah, well, yeah, okay, but this is actually astonishing. We are attaching the assets of this little piece of HTML, and we're teaching Drupal on which assets which HTML needs, which makes it look like this. What you're looking at now is the very first self-dependent, self-sustained, fully functional, themed Drupal front-end component. And it doesn't need any other complexity than all the complexity that's stuck in this folder. The HTML file is going to be found by Drupal. That HTML file, when Drupal finds it, it's going to go, oh, there is a libraries file attached to it, or there's a library attached to it. Let's find where that library is. And it's going to find it right next to it. And it's going to go open up that library, and then it's going to say, oh, where are the assets? Well, it's also going to be right next to them. And it's all nicely linked together through the libraries and the HTML.twig file. And it's a self-dependent component, which the amount of advantages this is going to bring, it's going to, I only have 50 minutes, but the most important one is that it's going to be giving you independent, themed, functional Drupal front-end components that are also understandable, readable, refactorable, groupable, and nestable, and so on. Because they all live within this one little folder, which I think is amazing, because this makes it readable even for a Drupal backend developer. And if it makes it readable for a Drupal backend developer, it's going to be making it readable also for non-Drupal developers. Now, another advantage, conditional loading. This is a really fun one, actually. I really like this one. Conditional loading means, let's say you've downloaded a component, I don't know, do you know the Views Infinite Scroll module? If you don't, it's like a little module that you can download, you can use on top of Views that gives you an AJAX button. If you click it, more items will get fetched through AJAX. Nothing really specific that you should know about it, but let's say you've downloaded a component that themes this exact behavior. Then you have an HTML file, CSS file, and a libraries.yaml file. Now, assuming this libraries.yaml file is attaching this CSS file to this HTML file, of course, this is conditional loading out of the box by just having components as a default. If you don't have the views infinite scroll module enabled, Drupal doesn't give a shit about that HTML file. It's never going to go look for that HTML file. It doesn't simply care about it until you enable the module. If you enable the module, Drupal is going to go, oh, I need this HTML file. Where I'm going to find it? Oh, in your team. It's going to find it in the team, and then it's going to find a library attached to it, and then it's going to find the CSS. Yes? That's the new theme structure. So the question is for the recording, does it automatically find HTML files in a components folder, right? If I can summarize your question like that? Yeah. No. I think it does, but that's also why you have to download the new theme structure. You also can't have partial libraries.yaml files in Drupal. It's still stuck. And there's lots of, like you only have one .theme file in a Drupal theme. I also fixed that. There's also, I just partimentalized everything to make it component specific instead of a theme specific. So you have conditional loading out of the box, which is pretty cool if you ask me, right? Because this has an other advantage. For example, maintainability. Now, I am a front-end developer, which means I have written JavaScript that breaks an entire UI on a website, on every page, right? You can't call yourself a front-end developer if you haven't done that. Now, the beautiful thing about this is now, if I write a bug in nodearticle.js, and that JS is only going to be loaded through nodearticle.html.twig, I'm only going to break node article pages. I'm no longer going to break the UI on every single page. Why? Because components become the default. We don't no longer ship every line of code we have in this blob. Now, whoops, there we go. Performance is then actually the result of this. Because if you have node CSS attached to the node HTML, it's only going to be loaded on node pages, not going to be loaded on taxonomy term pages. Because in the assumption that there is no node on a taxonomy term page, and it's by default, this is the libraries API. It has been doing this for a very long time. It's very good in what it does also. Same thing goes for page. If you write page CSS and you just write it for the page component, it's automatically going to be loaded on page or node pages and taxonomy term pages. It just knows. Drupal is so smart already that it knows when to aggregate which files. Which comes down to this. In the projects I worked with, I was able to keep 10% of the CSS of each page and 12% of JavaScript. I'm not telling you I found a new way to make your CSS and JavaScript 10% smaller. I'm saying I'm not even thinking about 90% of your CSS. Yes? Yes. The question is for the recording again. If I write a preprocess function in a partial.theme file, is it only going to get loaded on that page, right? Yeah, is it only going to get executed? Exactly. Yes. There is a whole documentation section on the platform where I explain how we can extend preprocess functions. Preprocess functions based upon content type, based upon view mode, which actually means only when that node is being rendered, for example, article nodes, then it's going to go only then search node, hook preprocess __ article. So we have a whole setup of extending our own hooks, which might feel like I'm destroying behavior of Drupal, but it's a practice on where we can extend PHP functions based upon the components that we have. Please do check it out, but I can send you the link afterwards. Would love to know what you think, actually. Usually when I show this slide, I was interested with your question. Usually when I show the slide, I get a remark, you're breaking the caching. The aggregation system, you're gonna break it completely because every time you need a new aggregated set of CSS. Yes. Yes, I'm breaking it. But you know what else is breaking it? Every contrib module in Drupal. It's how Drupal Libraries API works. I'm not breaking it, I'm using it. Now, you can tackle me after my session, obviously. Another advantage of this is flexibility. If you now think, oh, geez, Mathieu, I'm not going to write everything inside components. That's just a whole lot of work. That's fine. Download the Drupal theme or the component theme structure and just write everything in global components. Because that's kind of how we're doing Drupal theming now anyway. Everything is already global. And then once you get used to the idea of components, or once you want to have some time to get started in it, you can just write a CSS-only component. Maybe only abstract 4 lines of CSS. It's fine. If you want to just use that again in a new project, abstract only that. Link it to a libraries.yaml file and call it a CSS-only component. Or maybe an HTML-only component where you're going to attach multiple libraries. Because that flexibility is there too. Not every component can only attach one library, or maybe no libraries, or maybe 5 libraries, depending on which HTML you're using. Or maybe a JavaScript only component, or maybe an HTML and JavaScript only component, an HTML and CSS only component, or CSS and JavaScript only component. Whatever you're going to do, if you stick close to the fundamentals of the web, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you're going to be fine. Now, we have loads more. We have we have the flexibility to reuse code, because if it's all inside this one folder, we can just drag and drop that folder around, which is amazing in many aspects. We also make our code readable to non-Drupal people, which is also a big aspect of why this, I think, is going to catch up. And finally, I love to experiment on things. Like, I love to do Vue, I love to do React, I love to do all these JavaScript frameworks, but I find it irresponsible of myself to tell my client, because I'm a freelance developer currently without a job, but anyway, that I'm going to make their entire website rendered with React or entirely rendered with Vue. Well, if I was here 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would be talking about Angular. Well, nowadays no one is using Angular, and then I have to go explain to that client why their project has to be restarted over. I'm not saying frameworks are gonna eventually die, all of them, but what I am saying, if you really want to experiment, experiment on one part. Don't experiment and create everything with Vue. Maybe make one component with Vue, one with React, and see what you like most. And then when one library comes to die, you can just recreate that one component. It's a possibility. I'm not saying you should, but it's a possibility. Now, enough about the new theme structure, right? If you are convinced, and no one has left yet the room, which I'm very glad of, I'm very proud. The next layer is tooling workflow. I want to have cutting-edge front-end Drupal, and I want to have the tools that help me. How does that look? Now, mind you, my tooling workflow I've built in Gulp. I haven't grown bald from it, but it was very close, I think. If you want to swap out this second layer and you want to build something in Webpack, be my guest. It's open source. I would love to see what you come up with. But if you download the theme at the moment, because we only have one tooling workflow option, it's going to look like this. You're going to have a gulpfile.js folder. Who knew you could make that into a folder? Ridiculous. Anyway, that's where all the gulp file lives, all the gulp setup lives. From there, you can configure it. You can have project-specific configuration and environment-specific configuration. It's actually made in a way that it is focusing on developer experience. Because we all have our own opinions, I made sure we have 4 million different configuration settings. 4 million. So I'm pretty sure you're going to find one, right? It looks like this. If, let's say, for example, you two work in the same company. I saw you arrive at the same time. You're sitting close to each other. One person is nodding, the other person is not really sure. Anyway, maybe you know something that you don't yet. Let's say you're working on the same project, right? And the one person wants to use auto prefixer, well, the other person is going to have to say yes to that too. They're going to have to use the same settings because it has an impact on the end result of the CSS. So then you can configure loads and loads of things. I don't know if I scroll in here, if you can see that. No, but believe me, there are loads of settings. So you're going to have to use the same settings. But then we also have local configuration on which, if you want to use browser sync, every time your CSS changes, you want to resync your browser to look for that new CSS, and you hate that thing, that's fine. It's local configuration. So each environment can have their own local configuration, which is, again, developer experience. And it all boils down to having this new tooling workflow to be able to accommodate everyone. If you're a backend developer, maybe you don't want to set it up. If you're a server, then maybe you also don't want to set this up. And if you want a local, or if you want to have a lot of tools on your local environment, you can. And that's what this flexibility is about. Now, the new tooling workflow. There are, again, loads of advantages, but I'm already 30 minutes in, so I have to keep running. It's very easy to set up. You edit all the files that end in config.js. You run npm install and you run gulp. And even if you commit the CSS, because it's all very tiny files, as a backend developer, you don't even need to do this, which is also quite nice, if you ask me. We have Sass compiling, we have auto prefixing, we have lossless image optimization, we have linting of HTML, Twig, YAML, Sass, JavaScript, and PHP. We have JavaScript uglification or minification, which is not the same as aggregation, but not enough time. Swipey. We have Babelify and Browserify for people that want to write cutting-edge JavaScript, don't want to wait for browsers to catch up. We have component-based multi-team compiling. Now, I love how that sounds. Component-based multi-team compiling. I'm going to dive into this real quick. If you save a page.sass, it's only going to generate page CSS. It's not going to generate your entire blob. Why should it? You only changed one file. It's component-based compiling. Same thing for Node or any other component you make, which also means you could have a setup, because the gulp teaming doesn't really care about how many components you have, where your components live. You can tell where your components live, and you could even have multiple teams for one gulp, because why not? Everything is component-based anyway. Now, another advantage is that you can teach your own gulp how to clear your own Drupal cache, or rebuild, we now have to call it, which is pretty amazing. If I'm using Docker, I have this very specific command that I can fill in that clears my cache, but also try to teach a front-end developer that's new to Drupal and tell them, like, look, if you change the name of a Sass file, you don't need to rebuild your cache, but if you change the name of an HTML or Twig file, you do. If you change the contents of that HTML or Twig file, you don't need to clear your cache. It's funky. We know this if we work in it long enough, but it's a funkiness a tooling setup can avoid. For example, if you rename an HTML or Twig file, and you have the gulp configured in a way that you have that option, you're going to have a notification saying, oh, I'm now rebuilding your cache. You're going to wait a bit, all right? And then you got a new notification saying that it's rebuilt. Or maybe you want to turn off that notification. Everything is configurable, which is pretty cool, because why should we try to remember when to clear your cache? Gulp is smart enough to know when. That's when you add, rename, move, or remove an HTML.twig file, or when you add, change, move, or remove a libraries.yaml file. So it's going to clear it when you're changing a libraries.yaml file, but it's not going to clear it when you change an HTML.twig file. It's smart enough. It's also refactor friendly. Half of you said that you're doing front-end development, but for me, if you're working on a big project, it means that you have to refactor a lot. If you don't refactor a lot, you're creating a legacy project. If you don't refactor a lot, I might even say that you're not really doing front-end development. I'm very sorry to say. You're adding front-end development, which is also a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. It's not the same. Therefore, our tooling setup should be very flexible and very refactor friendly. For example, if you have a Sass file or a JavaScript file in a component, and we're going to duplicate that file, and we're going to name it testy variation, you're going to see it appear in the dist folder of this component. Until we drag it into a new component, a nested one, we're going to have a new dist folder created right there, and it's going to have the JavaScript file in there. The same thing for Sass, because the GIF is very fast. You can nest components, you can group components, you can rename things, you can drag things around. Gulp is going to be smart enough to know when to clear your cache, when to warn you when you're doing something stupid. You can nest, you can group them. You have auto-maintained dist folders. You never have to open up your dist folder, which is amazing. Like, how many times have we renamed an image file and then, oh yeah, and if you open up the dist folder, we now have 100 renamings of an image file that is still in there. It's ridiculous. Now, we have loads more. The Gulp setup is capable of Sass globbing, source mapping. It's also allowing cross-component variables and mix-ins. And it's auto cleaning up empty directories, because with Git that can happen. And the best feature of all is that you can disable every feature, which I find amazing. You can literally download the thing, disable every feature, and it won't do shit. Which is amazing, because it's for a developer experience. Maybe you might need that. Now, the third layer. Again, no one left yet. I'm very excited. If you are convinced of having an accommodation where we have to stop thinking in a blob way, are you convinced of the tools that might be able to help you to write really fast or really good code, then it would be egoistical to keep it to yourselves. So therefore, we have a platform to share. Now, the platform to share is going to remind you a bit of Drupal.org, how it used to work back in the day, because it evolves around downloading things. We have a big orange button on the website on which you can download the component theme and the workflow embedded into it. And then next, you can just browse the platform and you can pick which component you would like. And you drag it into your project. And some projects are going to use some components, and some are going to have a lot of components. Some of them are not going to have any components. That's fine, but you can browse, you can pick and select which components fit your need at that point in time. Or you can come back to this platform once you're creating new features. That's already how. So let's cover the advantages. The advantage is that this enables us to create components, and we can drag and drop them cross projects. Now, if you can drag them cross projects, I'm going to take you as an example again. If you can drag and drop them cross your own projects, it also means you can drag and drop them cross developers. If you can drag and drop them cross developers, it also means that developer doesn't need to work in the same company, which means that we can drag and drop them cross companies. So now we're talking about an open source community for Drupal front-end components. Wow. Sorry, I get very excited. This means that in order to make this happen, we have to have project-agnostic components. If you download the Drupal contrib module from Drupal.org, you're not going to have some project-specific stuff from Acquia in it. No, everything is project-agnostic. Well, maybe, but again, we're living in a perfect world, right? So our components have to be project-agnostic. Now, what does this mean? It means that you have to strip away project-specific stuff from, for example, the HTML file. You have to make it translatable, etc., etc. And then you also have to strip away the colors, the fonts, and the variables. Yes, we're going to make everything black and white. Every component is going to be a sketchbook. You know why? Because your orange component is not going to fit in your purple website. Or yeah, it might fit, but good luck. If everything is black and white, you have a sketchbook, and then you can just fill in the colors, you can fill in the fonts, you can do some spacing, and you have ready-made components, functional and responsive, ready for you to start using. And it's a lot of the code that you already have from the very beginning. Now, loads more details on that on the platform itself, but it means that if you have a component on the platform, you can share information on components. It looks a bit like this. This example is a text drop-down component. It's a fully custom component. I made a theme hook, for example, in a partial theme file myself. It's using Sass. Maybe you can't read it in the back, I don't know. It's using Sass. It's responsive. It's using Drupal behaviors. It's also accessible. It's using the building blocks of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it's using jQuery. I'm not going to stand here in front of this room and say jQuery is awesome, but this person who made this component, which might very likely be me, might not have had the time to learn more JavaScript and then of jQuery, And that's fine for this component. Not every component is going to be perfectly everything, but it's a start. And it's a good start for everyone to start contributing. Do you think in the beginning when we were making contrib modules for Drupal, everything was blazingly good? Well, no. It was full of holes. Now, it also means we can collaborate on components. If we can collaborate on components, well, yeah, obviously we're going to collaborate on components. So how does that look? If you go to the platform and you make a free account and you upload a component, you're going to be able, or the platform is automatically going to create a GitLab repository for you, next to also the detail page on the platform, on which you can see the source code, what are you actually going to download, but also all the other tools. You can make merge requests if you want for a component. You can use the web IDE to make some changes, etc., etc. You have issue boards, blah, 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 right? All the tools GitLab is going to invent for us, we're going to have. And Drupal modules are actually also going to live on GitLab pretty soon, or maybe they already are. I'm not 100% convinced. And that's pretty cool. But up until now, it kind of feels like I'm reinventing a Drupal platform for front-end components. But I'm not. It's actually better. Why? Because we're not trying to find a consensus in the different opinions we have as front-end developers. I'm not here to tell you that your opinion is wrong and we're going to follow his opinion. No. Every opinion is valid and it makes us really interesting as human beings, but also as front-end developers. So it looks a bit like this. Let's say I've made a component material cookie compliance, and it's built on top of the EU cookie compliance module, which is very popular in Belgium where I'm from. Not very much here yet, but anyway, let's assume you all know this. Then it's, for example, a themed component that is showing you a cookie bar, and it's using a lot of principles from Google Material Design. I like Google Material Design, but maybe you don't. That's fine. If you don't, then maybe you want to make another component that's made on the same exact contrib module, and you're going to make it smooth cookies. Because why not? You have a different opinion on how the interaction should happen on that component. You fork it or you recreate it and you make a new opinion for it. That's perfect. And they're both going to use the exact same folder name, so you're not going to be able to download both for your team. You're going to have to choose, but you have two opinions. You have the same functionality themed twice. I think that's pretty cool. This also means, if this is built for both the EU cookie compliance module, that we can have, I'm still working on this, I have some course issues, whatever that means. And if you now go to a Drupal.org module detail page, you're going to see that you can download the 8 version and the 7 version, but also which component variations you can download to throw on top. Because why not? Which opinion would you like to be implemented on your project? From who and by who, and how many downloads does it have? Now, you might also think, okay, well, Mathieu is building NPM, great. Luckily, I'm not. Why? Because we don't have dependencies between components. Every component completely stands on its own. If it's never being loaded by Drupal, that's fine. It's not a dependency. Now, you're still going to have edge cases where some components just belong together. From the same author, having the same spacing, etc., etc. And if they belong together, you can always make a collection. And the collection then is, for example, a big collection of all the same components. This is form items, for example, which is already very tricky in Drupal 8 to get right. And now you might think, I can hear the questions in your head coming, oh, Mathieu, is this already using Webpack? Is this already using React? Is this compatible with Vue? Are you supporting less? To all of those questions, yes. But for now, the yes is stuck inside your head. And I would love to see what you come up with, because everything is open source and it's community-based. And I'm kind of ending here on almost ending. And I just want to have this feeling. I really want to project this feeling that for a very long time I was a Drupal front-end developer. But for the very first time, I'm now a proud Drupal front-end developer. Like, tell the person closest to you, to your right, for example, your right, what's the last version of Node you were using? It's embarrassing. When is the last time you updated your NPM packages? Oh, it's very loud. Oh, I can't hear anyone. Like tomorrow you're gonna update them. It's embarrassing because it's tricky. It's a lot of work, and we're all working on projects. And because everyone is working in their own silo, and because we don't have this collaboration cross companies in our front-end tooling, that's why. I had another example, but I kind of forget now. Oh, when is the last time you had to run DressCR manually? Well, now we also have lots more. We have a component naming and nesting convention. We have Twig and hook extending convention. We have documentation on the 4 PHP functions I think a Drupal front-end developer should get to know, and that's actually the only ones. Preprocess is one of them, for example. And we also have version control of components, on which you can see, since you've downloaded the component, what changed in the repository. Now, let's put it all together, right? The 3 layers. We have a new team structure, we have the tooling workflow, we have the platform. How is that going to look for you? Well, it's going to look like this. Let's say this is your local host. And you inspect and you see a little line here. This is the output of Drupal set message. You inspect it, and you can see it comes from classy team. This is actually a very boring one line coming from classy team, and that's the default. So you go to the platform and you look for status messages components, and you find one, you go, oh, look, cool, this one has emojis. So you download the thing. You can see it's based upon flat design, for example. You download the component, you get a tar, you unzip it, and you drag it into your project. Now this is the new team structure, right? All the components are there. So you drag the component into your components, it's an already existing project, and Gulp is going to catch, oh, you just dragged something into the folder I'm watching, so I'm going to rebuild the cache for you because there is probably a new HTML file in there. Not probably, in this example it is. And then it's going to say it's rebuilt. So you refresh your browser, and now we have 8 seconds to fill because, right, cache. Let's summarize. What did we actually do? We found something that wasn't themed. We go to the platform, we download something that has been themed for us. We drag it into your project, Gulp catches it, clears the cache, and off we go. We now have a themed component. It has a little smiley, it has a box around it, which is gray, but you can't see it on this screen, unfortunately. Damn. But it's a themed component. You just had to drag it in there, and it's ready, it's responsive, it's gray. You're gonna color it, but it's responsive, it's there, it's ready. I think that's the power of what we're looking at. And that's my presentation. And I want to close down on the idea, or on the very only thing that I would really love for you to believe me in, is that my name is still Mathieu Spillebeen. I am a freelance Drupal front-end developer still, and I just want to share that I had the absolute privilege and the honor of finding people that do exactly the same thing as I do. And that's Drupal front-end development. And because I was able to find a lot of people for that, we started Frontend United, or we brought Frontend United to tens of thousands of people. We've organized, 22 conferences, in the only 4 years that we've been doing it. We've organized conferences in every part of the world already. We're still growing. We did 16 last year, simultaneous conferences, just because we found enough people that have the same vision as we did. And with Compony, I want to do the exact same thing. I'm not going to be able to do this all by myself. I'm going to need some help. For example, if you like this idea, don't just nod. Join me. Or tell your colleague. Or if you like it, tell your colleague. If you don't like it, make it better first. It's open source. And then tell your colleague. Tell your boss you would love to merge this process so you can no longer maintain your own NPM packages, for example. Now, help me help you. Invite me to give workshops in your company. I also give presentations. I also do birthday parties. So please come talk to me with any idea you have or any energy that you would love to put in. Thank you very much. And I also brought stickers. Thank you.